All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode 3 of the West Ham Media Tour, presented by Hammers Polls. I'm your host, as always, Justin Wassa, coming to you from Chicago here in the USA. Special guest today for episode 3, we have James Jones from the We Are West Ham podcast. James, how you doing, man?
I'm good, thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me on, mate. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well. Thanks for coming on. Um, yeah, so let's just dive right in, man. I first want to talk about the game on the weekend against Leeds. West Ham 2, Leeds 3. I mean, quite a poor performance, especially defensively. Um, that performance by Issa Diop was one of, if not the worst center back performance I've personally seen from a West Ham center half. But yeah, man, just thoughts. I mean, I don't know if there's too much else that we can say, but just thoughts on that game.
Yeah, it's just where'd you start?
Yeah.
I think the main thing that I took away from it being there was that we really struggled to cope with Leeds' press. Now we all know about Leeds under Bielsa. They're like really intense when it comes to their press. So much has been made about their style under Marcelo Bielsa since he arrived there. Like when they come from the Championship and then up into the Premier League, and last year they were superb. This year, not so well, but I think a lot of that's down to outside factors like injuries that they've had, COVID, obviously. But they still had that intense press that they do very well.
Yeah.
We didn't see it that much in the FA Cup game because they were so decimated. They had so many debutants, like youngsters playing.
Didn't they start like 3 teenagers or 4 or
Yeah,
something like that? Yeah.
yeah, that worked in our favour a little bit. But in the league game, we just really struggled to cope with it for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know whether it was tired. We'd only played on the Wednesday night. Leeds hadn't, so they'd had a week's rest. So we only had 3 or 4 days to really prepare for the game. We knew what to expect because they're a Premier League side and we played them only 7 days earlier. But that was the main thing. And then where Issa Diop's concerned, when you've got a player whose confidence is completely shut, and his confidence hasn't been the same ever since he got COVID. Just before that cup game against Hull at the beginning of last season, I think it was. He was a starting 11 player for us. Has to drop out of a game right at the last minute because he tests positive. Obviously don't know how bad he got it, but Balbuena came in alongside Ogbonna, and then Diop struggled to get back in the team for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
He had a bit of a run of games towards the end of the season, but really he didn't get back in the team. And then when he did get back in the team, he was all over the place. There were games last season where he was almost being coached through the game by his teammates and Moyes and the coaching staff, and it was... I don't believe that there's been a lot of criticism towards Diop over the last week, and, it was a poor performance. Every time, particularly, I think the first time he got the ball, he made a mistake because he had 3 or 4 Leeds players running at him. Made a mistake, and that set the tone for the rest of the game for him.
Yeah.
Like in particular, but for the rest.
He
didn't
of the want the well. Ball. He did not want the
ball.
Well,
he didn't, and we said it on the podcast earlier this week that when you're a player in any game, and in the first 2 or 3 minutes you get the ball and you've got 3 opposition players really pressing you, and you make a decision on how you're going to play the ball, and you make a mistake, and then the second and third time that's on your mind for the rest of the game, and then you still got that same pressure. It's your game's gone. Your game's gone straight away. And I think when that happens to a player whose confidence is clearly already rock bottom, that's what you get. You get a really bad, shaky performance that ends up costing the team the game. And it's a shame. A lot of people have been slagging him off, and it's a shame for Diop because in that first season he came to the club, he was superb. He was so good.
Yeah.
And we thought, we've had a deal here at 20 odd million quid. What a snip. Now, I think we'd be lucky to get 5 or 6 million quid in today's market for him. But he's still so young. He's still got so much promise. But for some reason, something's happened, and he's not the player that we bought. and we're, we're not getting it back.
Yeah.
So yeah. But all in, like to sum up for the Leeds game, it was frustrating because we had a big chance to kind of consolidate that top four spot. You know, all the teams, Tottenham have got like 100 games in hand on us, and Arsenal got games in hand, United got games in hand, and we needed those 3 points really to stay in there because by the end of this coming weekend, we could be seventh.
Yeah.
And, and then you kind of, even with those games, the teams above are still having games in hand on us because they've fallen so behind. So that's why the Leeds game was so frustrating because normally, if everyone had played the same amount of games and we were still fourth after losing that, you'd be like, okay, it is what it is. You win some, you lose some, but we go again. But now that defeat could be a bit of a decider in terms of whether we finish in. Oh, I'm not going to say the top four. I still think it was an outside shot that we'd finish in the top four, but probably the top six.
Top six, yeah.
Because United are improving under Rangnick very, very slowly, but they're improving under Rangnick. We saw that against Brentford the other night in the second half. So, yeah, it's frustrating, but I back Moyes and the boys to bounce back. I do. I really think that one thing he has done, David Moyes, is instilled a level of resilience in that, we tend to bounce back after difficult results. So, I'm hopeful that we do.
Yeah, I think since he's become the full-time manager, I'm not counting his previous stints as caretaker, but I think we've only lost multiple Premier League games in a row, like maybe twice.
I think it's two or three times. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, he does do a good job of getting the boys mentally prepared. But this wasn't a poll because it wasn't sort of a poll question, but one guy in our community, Barry Scott, and you sort of touched up upon this, James. He's like, we can never just win that game that can really maybe propel us. If we win that game, we're on 40 points. We're only 3 points behind Chelsea at that point, and now we'd only be 4 points with a game in hand on Chelsea, with a chance of a win this weekend to get us to within one of Chelsea. We just can't seem to win that game when it really, really, really counts. Why do you think that is? Is that just West Ham in a nutshell, especially against teams too like Leeds, right? And then Southampton you lose, but then you go on and beat Liverpool and Chelsea. And I wouldn't be shocked if we go on and get a result versus United. It's just, is that just West Ham in a nutshell?
Well, I mean, we've said it a lot on the podcast over the last 18 months. Is that we joke about West Ham being massive, and particularly 2021 was an incredible 12 months at the club, and what David Moyes has done since he returned to the club has been incredible. That no one saw it coming. But every now and then we're quickly reminded that, keep your feet on the ground. You're still little old West Ham. You might be just a little bit more massive than you were before, but you're still little old West Ham. You're still the same old West Ham that will do the same old West Ham things, like draw again with Brighton and still not be able to beat them, and draw with Burnley away, lose to Southampton on Boxing Day, lose to Leeds like we did the other day, but then go and beat Liverpool, go and beat Chelsea, or just little things like that. Could beat Man United in the cup, beat Man City in the cup, and I think the reason behind that this year is squad depth. I think last season was a real platform for the club to build on, and to go, right, okay, now we've arrived. We have the potential to really deliver on the promises that fans were given when we moved into that stadium. And it was a platform. It was like, okay, we finished in the top six. This summer, we need to mean business. We need to go out and make sure the squad's ready for Europa League, Premier League, League Cup, FA Cup. Let's fight on all fronts. Let's prove to everyone that we're ready. We've done it in the league. Let's not forget we're still fourth in the Premier League, which for West Ham is almost unthinkable at this time of year. Mm-hmm. Even when you think about last season. But if you look at the Leeds game last weekend, we were 3-2 down, and all we've got to call upon on the bench is Andrei Yarmolenko, who, let's be honest, he's been poor for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Masuaku, who blows hot and cold. and a young Sonny Perkins, who you can't rely on young Sonny Perkins to come on and start scoring late equalisers and winners. You just can't do that. It would be fair on him. And that's the problem we've got. Okay, Ben Rama's away at AFCON, and Souček's still out, but you've got, when you're trying to battle for a top four spot and you're trying to prove that you deserve the right to be in that conversation and be in that fight every season, then you need a squad to be able to back it up. And at the moment, we've got a starting 11, but that's it. And I think that's why we've come undone on a lot of occasions this season, so far this season, is that we just don't have the squad for it. And it concerns me that we're 10 days away, 11 days away from the transfer window closing, and it's still the same squad.
Yeah.
So where are we going to be this come May? No one really knows. So I think that's the reason behind it this year, which is frustrating given the progress that we've made up to this point under David Moyes.
So you're talking about the squad and the lack of transfers, and so I'm going to actually talk about two polls that we've had. This first poll here is from Lena Starr. She and I think I know the answer to this question. It's has the new investment? She's referring to the new investment from Daniel Kretinsky, I believe is how you pronounce it. Has that new investment brought any tangible differences to the team, training facilities, etc.? I mean, obviously the answer is no. And I'm going to assume that you agree with me, just like 93% of people. I'm not really sure what the other 7% are referring to. But assuming the answer is no, and please stop me if the answer is yes for you, I want to know, and this is another great question, and I'm going to share my screen really quick. Who's to blame here? Where's my screen share? There it is. Who's to blame here? So let me know if you can see my screen. But Tony Pearson says another transfer window, another linked with loads, slow to sign any. Ultimately, who will be to blame if we miss out on players? Is it GSB? Is it Moyes? Is it a bit of both? So I'll let you, assuming your answer is no to the previous question, I'll let you speak your mind on this question.
Well, in response to Lena Starr's question to begin with, I mean, I think it's still too early to say. I think we've been
fair. Yeah.
He only invested in the club
a couple of months ago, right?
2 months ago.
Yeah.
And we're led to believe that he has given the club a little bit of money to spend this month, but we know what David Moyes is like when it comes to signing players. He's very careful. He wants to make sure they are the right one. And in terms of Tony's question, like I just said about Moyes' transfer policy, he's very, very careful when it comes to signing players. We've seen that over the last 2 years, in that he won't bring a player in just for the sake of bringing a player in. He made that mistake when he signed Jordan Hugill in his first spell.
Yep. On
deadline day, desperately needed a striker. He went out and bought Jordan Hugill. He was rubbish. I think he's learned from that. And he probably also went against his own standards when he made that signing back then. And he's probably gone, right, well, I'm definitely not going to do that again. And so he's making sure that the players that they do put bids in, they do sign, are 100% the right players, not just for the football club, but for the squad. They're going to fit in nicely from a personality point of view. Mm-hmm. Because what he's built within the dressing room is, probably the best team in terms of harmony I can remember at West Ham.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's difficult to really answer that. Maybe it's a bit of both. I can't imagine GSB. And this might be quite a bit of an unpopular answer with some of the viewers, but I find it very hard to really blame GSB at the moment, because now we know what David Moyes is like in terms of when he picks his transfer targets. January is always notoriously a really poor window to do business in. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we got Lingard in on loan last year, and that turned out to be a wonderful signing. But notoriously, it's a poor window to sign players. Because clubs don't want to let their best players go midway through a season. It's fact. And given that Kretinsky has, as we're led to believe, put a little bit of money into the coffers for transfer signings. I wonder whether are GSB responsible? I'm not 100% convinced. I think what we're seeing at the moment is David Moyes still not 100% sure who he wants to sign. I would be very, very surprised if in the next 48 2 or 3 days, maybe 48 hours, that suddenly we don't start seeing a little bit of movement, because we are leaving it dangerously late, and it would be criminal not to do any business this month, given the size of our squad. But yeah, it's difficult to put an answer on that. Maybe it is a bit of both. If I was to vote on any of those three, I'd probably say a bit of both.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm swaying towards Moyes a little bit, purely because we know what he's like. We know what he's like now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely David Moyes is part of it. He has been very methodical in how he approaches transfers, and I think you need to be even more so in January because, like you said, it is a notoriously tough window to do effective business in, and there are plenty of examples of clubs throwing money at problems that they have mid-season, and sometimes throwing money at the problem just does not work. We've seen that as West Ham fans before. So I do hesitate to think that there are no restrictions based on anything that GSP has done. I mean, we know that they've been very stringy with their wallet. I mean, it is their money, but we have blamed them before for not opening up the purse strings when they've needed to. So I'm going to vote bit of both as well. And okay, nearly two thirds of people agree. The percentage of GSB's fault versus Moyes, that'd be interesting to debate in and of itself. But the last thing I'll say about this is, while Moyes has been very deliberate, you can't fault the man for his signings. Since he's come in, I mean, you can't point to a bad signing. Okay,
No.
maybe Crawl isn't going to work out. I think that's less so on Crawl and more so, he hasn't yet even gotten a good run in the side. So, but I mean, Bowen, Suchek, Benrahma, Dawson. I mean, these are players that have significantly outperformed based on the amount of money we've spent for them. So just high value, great performances, and most of them a combination of both. So while Dave is doing his thing and he's probably moving slower than a lot of West Ham fans would like, he sort of earned that right,
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing I'd like to say, is that, as much as we could put the blame on David Moyes for lack of activity up to this point, I don't necessarily think that his method in the transfer window is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. We've already reaped the benefits from how methodical he is in the transfer window. We've seen it, and we're enjoying it. Like Jared Bowen is like what a signing!
Fire.
What a signing! Benrahma, took him a bit of time to get going, but he's been superb. Suchek, you don't need to say, we all know about how good Suchek is. Sufal for £5 million. What a signing!
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's frustrating for the fans on the 20th of January not to even be anywhere. Well, as we're led to believe, we're close to signing a striker or a centre half, but he's earned the right to be trusted by the fans as well, and go, he'll get it right in the end. The decision, whatever decision he makes, it will be the right one. And, we need to trust David Moyes on that, because he's earned that. He's earned that trust.
Agree. The latest reports I've seen today are, and again, one thing I've learned is take everything with a grain of salt. But for the sake of discussion, the latest report, a $40 million swoop for Ben Brereton Diaz, I think that's how you pronounce his name, and Nat Phillips. Initial thoughts on if those were our two signings this month. Initial thoughts on that.
Well, where Brereton Diaz is concerned, I mean, when we signed Bowen, I think he'd scored 20 championship goals, or close to 20 championship goals when we brought him in for Hull. Diaz is on 20 championship goals this season, I believe. Chile international. Scores goals. David Moyes has clearly been scouting him for a while. I think we were linked with him in the summer. Maybe they're biding their time just to see how he got on the first half of the season, smashing it for Blackburn.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to sign Burris and Diaz, then happy days. I'd take it all day long.
Yeah.
Because you know that they've put the groundwork in terms of scouting him and 100% making sure that he's the right man to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And Nat Phillips, well, I mean, he was good for Liverpool. I think he made his debut against West Ham and he got man of the match.
Yeah, when they had that centre half injury crisis.
Yeah, and he got man of the match. And he was good for them when he had to stand in during that injury crisis. And I think he is a Premier League defender. He's not going to get in to Liverpool's starting 11.
No.
For obvious reasons. And if he's, 15, 20 million quid, then you'd probably take him. He's got the Premier League experience. He's experience playing for one of the best clubs in the world. And he needs to be playing regularly in order to fulfill his potential. We can offer him that. Let's, again, if it's just those two players, come the end of the window on 31st, I'll be a happy man. I think those would be two very, very good signings.
Absolutely. Agree with you. On Diaz first, I didn't even know we were scouting him in the summer. So obviously Moyes has had an eye on him, and he's done extremely well in the championship. I would absolutely love him too. I'm not getting my hopes up because why would Blackburn let him go now? They're
going for promotion,
right?
Yeah.
Right, and they desperately want to get back to the Premier League. I mean, they're a big club, and they want to get back there. And I would be shocked if they let him go in January. Phillips, I rate Phillips. I think I rate Phillips a lot more than other people do. But it seems like you do as well. I think he would be solid. He's young still, 24. He's played in some big games. He's obviously played for a big club in Liverpool. I think it would be best for both parties. I think he probably needs to move on in order to grow his career. Because he's not getting in that team consistently, and I think he's better than Diop. I think he's better than Dawson too. I would be very happy if that was our window. Extremely happy. And now on Phillips, we do have a poll. Who's this poll from? I think it just might be just a regular poll that we did. So if we had to choose one defender from this list, Ake, Tarkowski, Phillips, and Hose. I don't actually know how to pronounce that last name. Ake wins significantly. 59% of the votes. Tarkowski 14, Phillips 18, House 9. If you had to pick one out of these four, who would you pick?
It is a tough one. Nathan Ake, I mean, he signed for City in a very, very overpriced deal. I don't think he was. I think they signed him for 50 million quid. Like he's not a 50 million pound player.
No.
And I think that kind of almost clouds the judgment of fans when they go, "Oh well, City buying him for 50 million quid, then he must be good." It's like, well, if City buy anyone for 50 million quid, they'd probably buy Diop for 50 million quid if they wanted to. So that's not really a judgment for me. Don't get me wrong, he's a top player and he should be playing every single week in the Premier League for a club. Tarkowski, loads of experience in the Premier League for Burnley. I do wonder whether you put him into a better team and he gets found out a little bit because literally all he's done is play for Burnley, and that's no disrespect to Burnley, but we've not seen him in a better team.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's a bit harsh on him. And Courtney Hawes, I mean,
former West Ham player, I read too, right? Or he was in the academy, or am I thinking of someone else?
I think he came through the academy when he was really young. He's a local boy, but unconvinced, really unconvinced. Like Villa are moving in the right direction as a club. The fact that there are talk that they're considering selling him suggests that maybe he's not as good as people might think he is. I've never been convinced when I've seen him. The fact that Steven Gerrard is potentially considering letting him go and bringing in another player. I mean, if you're looking to get Villa centre half in, we're better than Aston Villa.
Yes.
So Tarkowski, I can understand the links because he's English and he's a good centre half.
Yeah.
okay, we're a better team than Burnley as well, but you can kind of understand it because Tarkowski's a better player than Courtney Hawes. And he probably should have moved away from Burnley a while ago, but you wonder why he hasn't. He kind of stands out as a really, really strong player in Burnley because he's probably their best player. But the likes of Phillips and Ake have both played for top four clubs, Premier League champions, European champions. One of those two, I'd take all day long.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be that. I wouldn't be that disappointed if we got Tarkowski. But Courtney Hawes, decent backup, but he's not a first team player for me.
Yeah, I literally couldn't agree with you more. I think Ake and Phillips, if we sign one of those two players, I'd be ecstatic. I'd be thrilled. They would be. I think probably not probably. I think they'd be our second best center back right away. Each of them would walk into the team. Assuming full strength. With Zuma back and Ogbonna out. Tarkowski's an interesting one. He's 28, 29, something like that.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah,
still
so.
good age, not the youngest, but decent age. It's interesting because his contract runs out at the end of the season. So it's like, even if we bought him, I'd hate to overspend for him. I know Burnley wanted to set a price tag of like 30 million or something like that in the summer, which I thought, even if he had a couple more years on his contract, a bit overpriced. So I wouldn't be shocked if we try to get him in the summer on a free. But in terms of the January window, I rate Nat Phillips. I think he would fit really well with the team. He's played in some big games for a big club. So if I had to pick one, I'd pick Phillips. But Ake and Phillips, either one. Hawes, I don't really know much about him, so I'll defer to your judgment on that. But if you had to pick one, it seems it would be between Ake and Phillips. So if so, which one would you pick?
I think I'd probably go Phillips purely because he's the more no nonsense centre half.
No, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And he's more of the Ogbonna mould in terms of no nonsense. Will throw himself in front of anything. Whereas Ake, I think, is more of the ball playing centre half, the pretty looking centre half that Pep Guardiola loves at City.
Yeah. Exactly.
Whereas Phillips, that you're going to get 110% out of him every single game, and that's not saying to Ake you wouldn't get 110% out of him. I just think Phillips is more suited to what David Moyes is looking for in a centre half, I believe.
Agree, completely agree. Sticking on transfer related polls, I actually think this next poll I think is a little funny that we're even discussing this. You may have an idea of what I'm talking about here. Let me share my screen again. And when I share my screen, you can see it pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, a question from Luke. Thanks, Luke, for this. I really can't believe we're genuinely debating this. Not even debating, just even talking about it. Would Andy Carroll be a good signing, provided he isn't our only one? I'll let you take it away.
I mean, don't get me wrong, but I love the bloke. I absolutely adore him. I thought his initial time at West Ham was, everyone knows about it. It was poor in terms of his injury record, and I think he ended up missing more games than he actually played in the 6 years he was at the club.
Really? Wow.
I wrote an article in it on his time at West Ham a while back. I did a lot of research on actually his injury record, and I think the 6 or 7 years he was at the club, he missed the equivalent of about 4 years out injured. And a lot of people slagged him off for that. It wasn't the guy's fault that he was constantly injured. It was actually because he was so relentless when it came to challenging balls and jumping up in the air and winning aerial duels that he ended up doing his body quite a lot of damage. But that said, there's no way he comes back to West Ham. There's absolutely just no way he comes back to West Ham at all. These rumours are born out of the fact he was spotted at the training ground the other day. He's mates with half the squad still. Kevin Nolan, who
Who is that? Sorry.
well, like he's really close to Mark Noble. Now Kevin Nolan was his mentor back in the day at Newcastle. Kevin Nolan's a coach at the club. He still owns a house nearby. So
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
so Andy Carroll being at the training ground, okay, he's without a club because he's not renewed his short-term contract at Reading, which surprises me given he was doing actually quite well for Reading
Yeah.
in the 2 months he was there or whatever it was. But it's not surprising. Everyone was like, "Oh my god, Andy Carroll's at training ground. Like, we're going to sign him. Oh, I hope we better not sign him." It's like, no, like he's Andy Carroll's best mate. He's really close with Mark Noble. He's really close with Aaron Cresswell. Of course, he's probably going to pop up at the training ground. He's got a house. Still got a house nearby. So if he's without a club and he's in the area, why not pop in and see your old pals at the training ground? Still probably knows after backroom stuff. So. Yeah, it's a complete no go for me. Like,
Yeah.
even if we were considering it, I'd be like, well, obviously not. We shouldn't sign Andy Carroll. But yeah, it's just a non-story in my book.
Yeah.
I might come back. That might come back to bite me. We might end up signing him on deadline day when we're that desperate. But yeah, I mean, I love the man. Some of the memories he gave us when he did play and he did score some very, very important goals for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll always hold him in a high regard. As a very, very good striker at West Ham when he did play. But given his injury record, we shouldn't be looking at him. And
Yeah.
I'm almost 99% sure we're not actually looking at him. He was just at the training ground to see his mates.
Yeah. Yeah. From all accounts, he's a top guy. People like him. He's a good guy off the pitch. And he was a good player, like you said. One of my favorite memories of him is that hat trick against Arsenal. I mean, it was just electric.
Yeah.
To what I would have given to have been there that day. So he was a good player on his day, just couldn't stay healthy. I mean, I'm obviously going to vote no here. I can't click it. Weird. There we go. Wow, there are more yeses than I thought there'd be. There are more yeses than I thought there'd be.
I mean, he can be a nuisance. He can be a nuisance. The Championship have found that out over the last 2 months, that he can be a pain in the backside to defend against.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. We've moved on from that. We've moved on from Andy Carroll, and we're a better team now. We're a better club, and that's no disrespect to Andy Carroll, and he'd probably agree as well. But it's just not a signing for us, and I'm pretty sure we know those discussions haven't even been had by David Moyes.
I agree. I'm assuming you're right. So another question from Tony. I guess you can say this is transfer related, although I don't think we're going to get rid of anyone at this rate. But what was the question? Which of the three players most touted to leave would you keep based on the amount? I'm assuming Tony means based on, the good things that they could theoretically bring to the remaining games of the season. Yarmolenko, Diop, and Masuaku.
It's a good question. I saw this one earlier, and it is a good question. I mean, to be frank, we can't afford to get rid of either of them given the size of our squad. Like, none of those three should be leaving this window, regardless of how ineffective Yarmolenko is, for example. But I mean, if we had to keep one out of the three, then it would probably be Diop, and that might surprise a lot of people. But I think, maybe it doesn't surprise a lot of people.
Most people agree with you. Yeah,
I think the reason why is because he's the youngest for a start, but I think he's the one that we need the most in terms of cover. We don't sign a centre back, like, he's our cover. Even when Zuma's back, like, we've got Zuma and Dawson starting centre backs. Diop's the cover. Now, if you get rid of Diop, then you need to bring someone else in, whether that's Phillips or not. But still, and given that he's still so young, maybe he does get back to the player that what we experienced in that first season. I think he's the one with the most potential to be able to return to the player that we kind of signed initially. Yarmolenko's finished. Like, just clearly is not bothered at all unless he's wearing a Ukraine shirt. And Masuaku blows hot and cold, like scores a fluky goal against Chelsea. But other than that, like a complete liability out on
Yeah.
that left hand side. Whereas Diop, okay, was a liability against Leeds, but he's not been terrible all season when he's had to stay. Like he's had one terrible, 100% terrible game. But other games he's not looked too bad. He's had moments where he's looked pretty good. So I'd keep him purely because he offers the most cover in a position that we desperately need cover.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, and I think Diop, and I was going to say this earlier, but I'll say it now given we're on him again. I don't know if you remember. So when Ogbonna signed for the club, he had a great year. That 15-16 team. Granted, a lot of people had great years at the club that season, but he started off well, and then I think he faded as well as the club did once we moved to the London Stadium. I think he always had a mistake in him. There were times where I just did not rate Ogbonna at all. I thought we should have sold him a couple times in that 17-18 window. He struggled to stay within the team. He also was hurt, I think, a little bit. And then for the last 2 years, he has been our best center back cumulatively, and one of the most consistent in the league. I don't think you can argue that. He's been so important to our club. And I don't know what it was. Maybe he needed that time on the bench to get himself sorted. Maybe that was motivation for him to, fight back for his spot, work harder. I don't know, watch film. I don't know what he did, but something clicked. He didn't get any faster. He didn't get any stronger. It was all right here. And Diop may need that.
Yeah.
Diop, when Zuma comes back, I think Diop's gone. I think it's Zuma and Dawson. That's my opinion of what should happen at least. And maybe it's signing another center back in the summer at the very least, hopefully this month. And Diop's back to fourth string, arguably fifth when Ogbonna comes back next season. And I think it's too early to give up on him because he is so young still. What is he, 24, 25?
Something like that, yeah.
So maybe he needs a couple years. Maybe he needs a couple years to fight for his spot, claw his way back, see what he's made of, and maybe he can pull an Ogbonna, and then 2-3 years time, he can be one of the most consistent center backs. I'm just saying, when I think of Diop's potential career trajectory, I think of how Ogbonna's career with West Ham has gone, and that's why I agree with you. I voted Diop as well, as you can see, and I am surprised at that percentage, just given the horror show that he showed on Sunday. A lot of fans, it's sort of just whatever you've done for me recently, I'll only consider that. So I am surprised a bit that it's 65%, but I do agree, and I think that's the right decision. Now I want to get into the team a little bit. So there's one poll here. Oh no, sorry, that's the wrong poll. Oh, I got it. Sorry about that. It's this one right here. So I'm going to stop this screen. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things within the team. We've talked about the defense and how it needs fixing and how Diop's been poor. I want to move a little up the pitch towards the midfield, specifically Alex Carroll. He hasn't been used. James, he just has not really been used. I think he's appeared in one Premier League game, maybe two, a couple cup games, a Europa League game here or there. He may not have more than 5 appearances, certainly no more than 6 or 7. Why do you think that is? Why do you think Moyes hasn't been using him? Our choices was he just simply doesn't rate him. Number of appearances, I didn't know exactly what that meant. I'm assuming it has something to do with his loan deal. And then still needs time to settle in. Why do you think Moyes hasn't used him?
I think it's the latter. I think he might be, surprisingly, given that he's got Souček and Soufal to keep him company in England, but I do believe it's a case of him struggling to settle. Whether that's struggling to settle off the pitch, or whether it's struggling to settle in terms of the squad and the tactics and really getting to grips with what David Moyes requires from a player in this position. I also wonder whether he was signed as almost a bit, not so much a panic buy, but almost like there aren't many other options. He's second or third choice. Let's bring him in for cover type player. We were led to believe early on last summer that the deal was done, but it was held off because he was going to the Euros.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the Euros. I mean, I think he started one or two games for them, but came off the bench in the others. Looked okay, and I don't know whether that then maybe forced David Moyes to potentially reconsider. But by then, the other options weren't viable, and he went, well, he was one of our choices. We'll bring him in anyway on a loan deal. I don't know. It's a difficult one. I mean, it baffles me because you bring a player in like that, he's a Czech international. We've seen the success we've had with Czech internationals, and they've been incredible. And I think a lot of fans were expecting Alex Carroll to be the same incredible Czech signing, and it hasn't worked out.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have liked to have seen more of him. There have been games where, particularly the Leeds game, where Lanzini has been chosen to play alongside Declan Rice, and maybe Carroll would have been the better option. Maybe Carroll would have been, more natural in that position. Maybe he against Leeds, perhaps Carroll would have been the better option in midfield. Like, difficult to say. Because Lanzini does look good in that position in most times he plays in it, but when you've got a player that's naturally that position, maybe it would have been better. But I don't know. It's a difficult one to ask. I'll sway towards the latter. Still needs to settle in, but he's not got much longer to settle in. We've only got a few months before the season ends. So I mean, I'd be very, very surprised if he signed him permanently at the end of the season.
I was just going to ask that. I don't think he's really shown enough.
Then he's not had the opportunity, has he? So it'd be harsh to kind of put the blame on him and go, well, he's not done enough. It's like, well, you do wonder whether maybe he has done enough in training, but Moyes has decided that actually, no, he doesn't fancy him, doesn't trust him for whatever reason. We don't know.
Yeah, we're agreeing a lot today. I also selected still needs to settle in, and I still think there is time. Time is quickly running out, though, and I also think it's an example of the fact that our defensive midfield is arguably the strongest, most important part of our team. Declan Rice is our best player. Thomas Souček, was arguably our best player last year, won Hammer of the Year. I think also his absence versus Leeds was visible. I mean, Leeds had so much space. So it seemed like we had two defenders at times back there. And I think that having Rice and Lanzini in those positions, both Lanzini's been like this all the time, and Rice really more so has come on this year as very forward thinking, like moving forward, go up the pitch. And Rice has been superb at it with his long stride. Lanzini's obviously a creator that wants to get up in the attacking area of things, and that just left us hopelessly open at the back. I do think that maybe Carroll would have been a better option against Leeds. I think he probably goes forward a little less than Lanzini. Stays back there like a Souček would. But I think, again, going back to what I was saying about Carroll, how is he really going to break into the side? I mean, Souček and Rice, you're not going to start Carroll. But it was a little concerning to not even see him start versus Leeds. So I don't think we'll sign him permanently as well, unless something sort of miraculous happens with him.
But everyone knew he'd been brought in as cover for Souček and Rice. The worrying thing is that we've lost Souček for a few games, and Carroll still hasn't been selected.
Right. Yeah.
Even Souček's been chosen over Carroll in Europa League games. That's worrying because those Europa League games were a good opportunity, particularly the latter stage of Europa League when it looked like we were going to qualify anyway because we'd done all the hard work in the first two. It's like, well, let's give Crow a go. And he was only really coming off the bench, or if at all. And Souček's played up before his absence. Souček had played every single game for us.
Mm-hmm.
The player's so important, and you've got a player on the bench that can fill in. Like, why isn't Crow filling in those boots in some of those games? Which is the worrying thing. Maybe, obviously, we don't know what's going on at the training ground. Maybe Moyes has decided that actually he's not keen. We don't know. Or maybe he is just still struggling to get to grips with the UK and the style of play. It is an odd one, given the success we've already had from Czech players.
Yeah, it is, and we'll see what happens. One last final fun poll here before we get to your question. Luke again brought this to our attention. Pretty random, but it's actually a cool little debate. What free kick do you think was better, Payet versus Palace, which I was actually there for, which is awesome, or the one versus United in the cup?
Palace all day long.
I mean, I think obviously the one versus United was bigger. It was on a bigger stage, right? The quarterfinal, and it was from farther out. But the fact that, and I'll never forget, because and we didn't plan this, but me and some of the Chicago boys went there for the game, and it was International Supporters Day. So at halftime, we actually walked around the pitch,
Nice.
and so they brought us down in the 35th, 38th minute. And he scored that kick in maybe the 41st, 46th. So we're there, and we're seeing it from across, and you just see that ball. It looked like it was going to sail over 10 yards, and you just see it. And not only that, but Hennessy, who I believe the keeper was for Palace, he was on that side of the goal. I mean, there was just, a couple feet to his upper left where you could slot that ball in, and he didn't even move. Yeah. And I think that just showed how technically gifted Payet was and how superb that kick was. Yeah, man. I mean, I think Palace. I'm a little biased as I was there, and yeah, most people think that as well.
Don't get me wrong. The Man United one, it was a bigger stage against best goalkeeper in the world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the sound it made when it hits the post and in the back of the net will always just gives me goosebumps.
Were you there?
I wasn't there, no, but when you watch the replays, you just hear it hit, like the sound it makes makes it so much better. But for me, the Palace one, just purely as you just described, it almost defied all logic. Like, we were there, we were on the corner, we were in what they call Chaff Corner at Upton Park. And
which corner is that?
So if you're looking at it from Payet looking at the goal, left hand corner.
Okay, so you were opposite me. Okay, yeah.
So, and me and the boys laugh about it now. Is that actually, like, we still refuse to believe it actually went in, because it was just like he hits the ball and you're like, oh, that's gone over, and then suddenly it dips in just out of nowhere, and everyone's looking at each other like, how on earth has he done that? And you watch the replays from all those different angles, and you're like, that defies all logic. Like, no one should be able to do that with a football, and he was that good that he managed to do that with a football. And the fact that Wayne Hennessy was on that side, like you said, and he still didn't move, like, just genius for me. Like, just the best free kick I think I've ever seen, purely because of the way he's, like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it defied physics, honestly, man. It really did. Is he the most gifted player you've seen in a West Ham shirt?
Probably, yeah. Probably, yeah. I mean, some people will go back to Di Canio, and Di Canio had his own very unique gift and quality and passion. But Payet was on a whole new level of, you just knew, particularly in that season, that farewell bowling season, that you just knew every game you're going to see something incredible from him. He was going to do something weird and wonderful and incredible and magical, and you're going to go away knowing, win, lose or draw, that you'd seen something incredible. And he delivered 9 times out of 10. So for me, Payet probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame the way it ended, but man, to have him for the time that we did, and especially that season, the last one on the Bowlin,
Oh
sort
yeah,
of sort of a mystique about it, a little magic to it, right?
yeah.
The fact that it was that season out of could have been any other season, could have been the season before, the first at the London Stadium, and the fact that it was at the Bowlin, perfect, really
It was
perfect.
almost as if it was meant to be, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
And
I mean,
then
I think there's a lot of things that were meant to be that season.
yeah,
Him, how well we did, how well Mark Noble did. The last game, it's sort of scripted. It was sort of like a fairy tale, really, at
yeah,
times. It really
yeah.
was.
And you're right. It ended. It ended in a way that kind of left a bit of a sour taste, but and it was such a shame the way it did. But the memories that he gave West Ham fans, particularly in that season, you look back and it's just like what an incredible season, what incredible memories he gave us, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And he's still doing well for Marseille. Um, James, we'll wrap it up. I know we're a little over time, so I appreciate you sticking with us, man. I really do. I want to get to your question though that you brought.
sure,
Um, and we'll post it after we're done here. But so James's question or your question, given West Ham's desperation for a striker, but Moyes' reluctance to just sign anyone, would you rather sign a striker who might risk the harmony and balance of the squad, that team spirit we were talking about, or don't sign a striker in January, stick with Antonio until the summer in order to preserve that harmony and balance and team spirit? So you brought the question to the table, but I'm interested in your answer to it.
So I've been thinking about this a lot recently. It was born out of a discussion we were having on the podcast a few weeks ago when all the rumours about Gabriel Barbosa were doing the rounds, and there
Hmm.
was talk about we were going to loan him. And I mean, Gabriel Barbosa. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Championship Manager, Football Manager games, and he's a legend purely for those games. And you used to sign him on there, and he'd score you 100 goals a season, and he was just a bit of a cult hero. Um, So I was like, oh, brilliant! Like, imagine Gabriel Barbosa turning out for West Ham every week. But actually, when you look at it, and if anyone that knows about South American football might already know and listen to Phil Vickery, the South American football expert, who if you want to know anything about any player in South America, you go to Phil Vickery, and he's revealed that actually he's got a bit of an attitude problem,
Hmm.
and everyone was getting excited about signing Gabriel Barbosa, and then you hear that and you're like, okay, like no question, he's a good striker. But if he's got an attitude problem, do we really need that around this current squad?
Right.
This current squad that is so clearly all together pulling in the same direction.
Hmm.
Even the squad players aren't moaning, they're not complaining, they're just getting on with it. David Moyes has built this squad harmony, this team spirit that we've never. I don't think we've ever. I can't remember the last time we've ever seen a West Ham squad like this. Not in the Premier League era, I don't think. And um, do you risk it? Given when you consider what we're trying to achieve this season and what we achieved last season, do you risk it purely because we're so desperate for a striker, or do you go? Do you know what? We managed it last season with just Antonio. Technically, okay, we sold Haller in January. Um, I mean, let's just keep him again for the next 6 months. We'll just protect him as much as we can, and we'll keep Antonio for another 6 months, and then we'll make sure we get someone in the summer. It's a difficult one. Personally, I would rather stick with Antonio than just sign someone for the sake of it. I just
Well, you're saying signing someone. Are you saying that it's either keeping Antonio or signing someone that will ruin that team
that
spirit
could
or
that
could?
could.
Okay,
I'd rather us not gamble. If there's a potential, someone like Gabriel Barbosa, for example,
I see what you're saying. Okay, okay.
who we're led to believe he's got a bit of a bad attitude, thinks he's the best, thinks he's sliced bread, doesn't like being subbed off, doesn't like being benched, will throw a hissy fit if he gets subbed off when he doesn't want to be subbed off. But apparently that's a thing with him. Do we need a character like that around the dressing room? I'm not saying every striker's like that, but I'd rather us know if we're going to sign a striker this January, which we 100% need to do. But it has to be a player that comes in and not just improves the squad and the team and adds goals to the team and gives Antonio a bit of a break and is a good backup to Antonio, but also fits seamlessly into the team spirit, into the squad, becomes part of the squad instantly with no issues. Understands that this squad is so tight knit and so successful, and is going places. If that player coming in can't buy into that off the pitch, I'm not sure I'd want to see the club take the gamble. I'd rather stick with Antonio and spend another 6 months finding that right player.
Yeah.
Because I think all it takes is one bad apple and one bad egg to go into that dressing room. And what we've experienced, it could all come crashing down very quickly because of one bad apple. And that's what worries me the most. Like with every signing, you trust David Moyes because he does his homework. He makes sure.
Yeah.
But it just worries me. The more desperate we get, are we going to make a mistake? And a lot of people might be like, "It's probably got nothing to worry about. It's fine," and maybe. But we've had such a good 2 years, and we see, and it's a lot of that is because of how close the squad is, how close knit the squad is.
Yeah.
I'm so worried that one signing, out of desperation, brings it all crashing down because he's the wrong character.
Yeah. I think that's what we were talking about before, right? And how Moyes has done such a good job of that, and he deserves to. Yeah, he's earned the right to, take as long as he needs and be as deliberate as he needs. So,
Yeah.
I trust in David Moyes. I trust that if he brings someone in, he'll bring someone in that will perform as well as mesh with the team well. Otherwise, yeah, I don't want it. And if Moyes doesn't bring a certain player in January, I trust in his decision. He's earned that right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, James, thanks again, man. Million thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And we also, went over. I try not to take too much time, so thank you. Appreciate that. Enjoyed our conversation. I always do. We'll certainly have you on again in the future. Got to get the other boys on too. I've talked with Will as well. We'll get him on too. And but yeah, man, I really appreciate the time. And just stick with me really quick. I'll end the broadcast. And yeah, come on, you Irons. Thanks, James.